Hunter Biden story and the BLM mansion story, the media is very, very reluctant to cover these stories. Though, to the Young Turks' credit, they covered it. So it feels like, well, first in general, I think almost all of BLM's, well, let me say, I think all of BLM's money is probably going to end up being ripped off. There's going to be a few that are going to go down for this. But when I say go down, you think, oh, well, what's the punishment if you get three people who form a corporate form to embezzle and defraud like $60 million? You think, oh, they go to jail for 50 years or something. No, not nowadays. I don't know what they'll get, but it won't be what you think. It'll be like a very, very short term because you don't live in the country you thought you lived in, of due process and yeah, equal and fair treatment for everyone. It's like you can be in BLM as long as you're POC and you can steal tens of millions of dollars. And realistically, probably nothing serious is going to happen to you. Like, I mean, doing like hard time now, that's not going to happen. Maybe sometime, but not. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's like the risk and the reward don't balance out. It's like doing very soft, like federal pound me in the butt prison. Not for these people. It's going to be a very white collar thing. If someone decides to go after it, and there's no guarantee they will, they might just. I mean, BLM is. I want to say it's the biggest scam. It's that would be like the central banks or something. It's the biggest scam in a long time because there's over $1 billion that went into BLM, and it just seems to kind of magically disappeared. But the little $6 million and $60 million is popping up here and there, and people looking at it like, yeah, they're not turning this money into anything. So what happened with this woman, Patricia, was she formed this corporate form to limit her own personal liability, which is, the purpose of an LLC. And under this corporate form, she bought this mansion where the title was tied to these three women who were in BLM, and then they weren't in BLM any longer, but they still had access to the money. And they bought a $3 million house that was to be used for the purpose for which the LLC was formed, something related with the advancement of black people, which would seem to violate federal law. But we'll get to that in a second. And they bought it from someone else who they knew who was in or associated with BLM. But it was like a $3 million property that, if it was assessed correctly, it should have been like at $3.5 million or about that. So they bought it at quite a markup, which makes it kind of look like they do this in the art community too, where, I mean, Hunter Biden is probably doing it, where they're selling art for like, oh, we're going to value this painting at $500,000 and sell it for $500,000. Yeah, that seems like a very soft money to look at a painting by an artist who has no pedigree and no history, and you're like, yeah, this is not worth $500,000. We all know this, so something else is being like, yes, you're paying the money, but what do you get in exchange for it? Because you're getting something more in exchange for it than a simple painting. You're getting access to the president, perhaps. I was going to say I didn't know the son was that closely tied to the dad, but I don't think the dad knows what's going on. Anyway, so all this is kind of interesting for us, #OurGuys, because we could form a European Lives Matter and form charities and various corporate forms also. We could even start a religion if we wanted to. I know there's that one, what is it, the Asharte religion or something, Ashante, something like that. And our side, back in the old days, would have got kicked off of all crowdfunding and payment processors and kind of things like that. But now we have Give, Send, Go, and there's various other payment processors that are starting to get around the mainstream ones. And really, I mean, you'd have legal challenges also, because you've got, if they try to ban you, but they don't ban these groups, it's like it looks like you might have some standing for that. Anyway, so there are these, there are many different forms of BLM, and then there are many different hands on the money. There are different subsidiaries of BLM, and there's some that share similar names and aren't related to each other whatsoever. And this isn't like an Enron type deal where back in the late 90s where they went after that, because that was like, there wasn't the politics involved in that situation. The politics involved in this are something quite different, which means they're either not going to get punished, or the punishment's going to be very, very light, because a lot of people who are pulling the strings behind this are, the Soros types who are, administering, like, we're donating $1 billion or chunks of 100 million here, 50 million there, 10 million there. And then the people who administer it are going to be, friends and family who are being paid like $300,000 to administer this fund. You go, okay, so of the funds that you donated, $100 million, how much of it actually went to doing anything? How much of it went to administration fees? And you look at it, you're going to look at this in 10 years if somebody has a history of this, and it's going to be like, oh, all of it went to administration fees. They essentially got donations either from themselves when they use it as a tax credit or tax write-off, or from just suckers, and they just paid themselves these donations. Because I suspect that's what the future is going to hold if there's even a country around in 10 years where people even care about this. And, ultimately, does it matter? It's, at this point, it's all deck chairs on the Titanic. But in terms of financial history, this is probably one of the biggest scams, financial scams in it. I don't know, since 1913, because you're dealing with billions of dollars that just kind of seemingly got back in the donors' pockets, and nothing was. I mean, no matter how you feel, I know you're listening to me, you're on the hard right. No matter how you feel about BLM, you have to admit that there are things they could have done with this money if they had a fair person to administer it. And the thing is, there's something like over $1.5 billion in donations to BLM. So it's weird that the money went out the door and it got funneled through all these local BLM groups in tens of millions of dollar chunks. But here's the really weird thing about all this BLM donations. It doesn't seem to have resulted in anything concrete. And what were they trying to accomplish? Separation from evil whitey, and now it's white and Spanish America. Though black people don't seem to think like America is this white place and it's like black and white, and they don't seem to understand like it's a shrinking white population. It's like pretty soon you'll be dealing with the Latin American population and not the white population. It's funny because the wealthiest people in America are not white. Whites don't have the power that black people think they have. Like up until about 1970, that might have been true, but those days are long gone, and they don't seem to have caught on to it. We're trying to get, what would the best thing for their BLM community to do would be to probably separate, probably form their own geographic area where they can kind of play by their own rules. Really, I know that's kind of far out. The more realistic situation, the most critical thing for their community would be to get the father back in the home. That's absolutely the most important thing for all communities, is to have an intact family. There were many things you could have done with the money, and I suspect that these women spent the money on themselves. All of a sudden, they go from like, so what were you driving last year? Oh, I was driving a BMW 3 Series at $50,000 car. It's like, what are you driving this year? $150,000 7 Series. Like, well, where'd the income come from? Well, I'm an administrator of this BLM money, and so now I pay myself, $500,000 a year. Oh. So how much of that money is going to like charity? Well, we've got like yeah, but like at the end of this, you're going to find out none of it went to charity, which is part of the goal all along. So the thing is, all this stuff like getting fathers back in the home, that kind of stuff. So what a Pollyanna viewpoint that is. Yeah, the intact family structure, which worked for 1 million years, right? Or at least in the tribal level, 10 million years, came down from the trees. So BLM are socialists, and they're openly anti-family. They had that on their website until they finally had to change it because people were like, even people in the BLM community are not anti-family, but the people who are pulling the strings are. So they didn't want families with a father. They said they wanted some kind of like matriarchal family pods or community. I mean, it sounded just like some ridiculous Wakanda fantasy of just nonsense. Like, oh, a bunch of women are going to work together to raise kids in a pod. It's like, women hate each other. The only thing that works is an intact family and extended family. It's like, we're going to have like a kindergarten like the Europeans do. It's like, yeah, that works for the Swedish and the German maybe. But anyway, so I think they knew that getting the father back in the home is impossible because you would have to end the incentive to keep the father out of the home, which is welfare. Essentially, the taxpayer is the father. So if you don't need a father, you don't need an intact family anymore. It's like, well, a lot of these women, like, they're not going to have one. They're just going to, they know they can get money in welfare one way or another without the family. It's like, well, if you pay for something, you'll get more of it. And that's what happened in about 50 years ago. Welfare, the Hart-Celler Act, destroyed the family. It starts with the black family and then Spanish, and then finally you're seeing it in the white family. But it's not politically correct to admit it. They use it as a way to further their police and societal state, which is coming. The BLM on the ground don't understand that they're ushering in a police state. But the Rosenbergs, who are behind the scene, absolutely do. That's the goal of the creation of a socialized state, and a militarized police state. It's like, what have you seen if you look at the evolution of the police department over the past 50 years, from small town mom and pa to SWAT teams, to special SWAT teams would come out when it was needed, to militarized police, to insane levels of militarized police with APCs and all this kind of stuff. It's like, so why have you needed that? Well, I mean, this video is for YouTube. I can't answer it, but you know why they've needed that. That was the goal all along, because they want centralized. They want centralized. Or I should say 3 times right for echoes. They want centralized power, because they know that they can control the centralized power. So most of BLM are useful idiots for these globalist puppet masters. They really don't understand. And to be fair, like the Antifa also, the people who are the foot soldiers, they really don't understand what's going on or what this is doing to future generations. But I also don't think they care, because imagining the future conditional is very difficult for them, probably just due to evolutionary environment, the differences of endless summer versus winter. Winter, if you have a winter, means you got to plan ahead. You got to cooperate. You got to plan. You got to live together in a winter environment without resulting in aggression, where healthy young men are deleting each other. You've got to work together. So it's like, that's why the European mindset, or even a lot of the Eurasian mindset in general, is different. That's why people who grow up evolved in a winter area are just so much radically different from people who evolved in an endless summer grasslands area, where there's millions of years of not having to have that future conditional, the anxiety and worry of future conditional conditions changing and preparing for them. So it's like, that's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years of evolutionary biological differences. And everything I just said and I'm alluding to is absolutely would get you canceled in any university. But it's like, everyone knew it in universities in the 80s, 90s. I mean, they still know it. Everyone in whatever field that is, evolutionary biology, anthropology, they still know it. It's like, these aren't secrets. You know the difference of all those cranial capacity studies. You can still online, if you want those. You want to read those studies for yourself, those PDFs, which is, nowadays you're really going to need to print things out and make hard copy libraries or micro SD cards and pass those things around to have the library, the future library of Alexander. Anyway, even if they put the money into their programs, whatever, I don't know what their programs would have been, like a couple of small satellite schools. I mean, because for me, my opinion, the root cause is the destruction of the family. You have to have the father in the household, and you also have to have the extended family strong. So that without addressing the root cause, nothing you do, everything you would have done with that money would have failed one way or the other. So ultimately, if they want to buy, a $200,000 AMG and live in a mansion, or at the lower level buy, with reparations, just simply buy tennis shoes and Hennessy and cigarettes and just essentially pour the money back in the community without actually like investing in a business. Like, even if you fail at starting a business, it's like some people will succeed, and ultimately you learn from that failure. Everything they would have done with that money would have failed. So I'm saying, like, you could have put it into just the stupidest things imaginable. And it's like, gee, the cost of like Nike tennis shoes would have gone from, you'd be like $2,000 for the standard Nike tennis shoe and $20,000 for the collectible. I'm not one of those tennis shoe heads. I wear a pair of fucking flip-flops. So I feel like the dude a little bit. Like the dude, what was that movie? I forget those guys in the dude. You get to a certain age, you really understand the guy drinking a beverage and wearing flip-flops in a bathrobe. It's like, you really, really get that on a deep level. So the only way to fix this situation in America is with heavy crime and punishment, where actions have consequences. or a physical separation, which I realize is really, really a far out there idea. You want to go back? I think, yeah, I think it would improve things. That way, water could kind of seek its own level in terms of the philosophy of jurisprudence and aggression. And I'm referring to the LeBron James issue with the police who there was a girl stabbing another girl, and LeBron James wigged out, and people came to the defense and they said, "Oh, well, this is part and parcel of our community." It's like, okay, well, if that is the truth, then you need to have your own de jure as well as de facto geographic community where it's yours. You'll get resources, but there's no point in mixing communities that way. I mean, I'm saying you need to have black cops, black judges, black businesses, everything, your own community. It's like water can seek its own level. You can have the level of violence you want, the level of police interaction you want. And then ultimately, when the police come to do things like this, there won't be an issue of tribalism. It'll all just be the same tribe. So at least like you can deal with things without having to worry about racial issues. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys all next episode.